Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about one of the coolest places in history, Mesopotamia. The name means between two rivers in Greek, and it's exactly what it sounds like. This ancient region was located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in what is now Iraq and parts of Iran, Syria, Kuwait, and Turkey. Mesopotamia wasn't just one civilization. It was home to many cultures and empires over thousands of years. What makes it so special is how much it influenced the world we live in today. Things like writing, the wheel, laws, and even beer were first invented here. That's why it's often called the Cradle of Civilization. This is where city life and recorded history began. Unlike civilizations like Egypt or Greece, which were more unified, Mesopotamia was a mix of different cultures. Each had its own customs and languages, but they also had some things in common. For example, they shared religious beliefs, even though the gods had different names in different places. Women had surprising rights for the time. They could own land, start businesses, and even get divorced. Two of the most important things in human history, the rise of cities and the invention of writing, happened here around 4000 BCE, thanks to the Sumerians. Writing started as a way to keep track of trade and grew into something much bigger. It's amazing to think that simple marks on clay tablets eventually led to the languages we use today. Mesopotamia's success in trade brought wealth, which helped cities grow and thrive. Some of the most incredible inventions came from this region. They created the wheel, which archaeologists found in the ancient city of Ur. They also developed irrigation systems, advanced tools, chariots, and even ways to divide time into hours, minutes, and seconds. Mesopotamians were also the first to brew beer. The oldest beer receipt in the world was found here. Education and learning were highly valued in Mesopotamia. Schools taught reading, writing, law, medicine, religion, and even astrology. The Babylonians believed water was the source of all life, and this idea might have influenced one of the first philosophers, Thales of Miletus, who probably studied there. Religion was a huge part of life in Mesopotamia. People believed that the gods brought order to the world, but it was up to humans to keep it that way. By performing rituals, respecting the dead, and doing their jobs, people thought they were helping to maintain balance. They also told fascinating stories about their gods, like the creation myth, Enuma Elish, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest written story in the world. Many of these stories influenced later religious texts, like the Bible. When it came to work, everyone had a role to play. Most people were farmers or raised animals, but there were also scribes, artisans, teachers, and priests. Women were heavily involved in trades like brewing beer and healing before men took over those jobs. Work wasn't just seen as a way to earn a living, it was also a way to honor the gods and contribute to the community. Business deals and contracts were written in cuneiform on clay tablets, and many of these documents have survived for thousands of years. And in the middle of every city stood a temple called a ziggurat. These pyramid-like structures weren't just giant buildings, they were deeply important to the spiritual life of the city. Each ziggurat was built to honor the city's main god or goddess, showing how much the people depended on their deities. Bigger cities often had more than one ziggurat, emphasizing their importance. Mesopotamian cities were mostly made from sun-dried bricks. This wasn't because they preferred it, it was because the region didn't have stone or a lot of wood. Historian Stephen Bertman explained that people used the materials they had. They took clay from rivers and reeds from marshes to create some of the earliest columns, arches, and roofs in the world. Simple homes were built from bundles of reeds stuck in the ground, while more advanced buildings used bricks that were sometimes painted for decoration. Religion played a big role in how buildings were made. Before starting any construction, the people performed prayers and rituals, asking the gods for success. This strong connection between religion and daily life also shaped the government. At first, priests were in charge. They claimed to know the gods' wishes by reading signs and performing rituals. But later, around 3600 BCE, kings took over as rulers. These kings still honored the gods but also acted as their representatives on earth. One famous example is King Hammurabi of Babylon, who created one of the first sets of written laws. These laws were carved into stone and presented as rules from the gods themselves. Ruling in Mesopotamia wasn't easy. Kings had to manage large areas filled with different cultures and groups of people. This often led to revolts and uprisings, as not everyone wanted to follow the central government. Even powerful rulers like Sargon of Akkad, who created one of the first empires, had to deal with constant challenges. Governing such a big and diverse region required both strength and careful planning. To understand Mesopotamia's history, it helps to divide it into time periods. During the pre-pottery Neolithic Age, around 10,000 BCE, people began forming small villages. They started farming and raising animals, but it wasn't a quick change. It took time for people to switch from hunting and gathering to farming. By the pottery Neolithic Age, around 7000 BCE, tools and pottery improved, and people developed unique cultures. The Copper Age, starting around 5900 BCE, was an important time. People began using copper for tools and weapons instead of stone. Villages grew into towns, and during the Uruk period, cities like Uruk and Eridu became centers of trade and innovation. This era saw amazing inventions like writing and the wheel, which changed human history forever. As cities grew, so did art, architecture, and technology. Cylinder seals, small carved objects used to mark property or sign documents, became popular. These seals show us how creative and skilled the people were. During the early Bronze Age, tools and weapons made from bronze were introduced. City-states became more stable, and this stability allowed for the rise of the Akkadian Empire, led by Sargon the Great. The Akkadian Empire was the world's first multinational empire. Sargon's daughter, Endoana, was the first writer whose name we know. She left behind poems and stories that give us insight into the culture of the time. Libraries, like the one in Mari, held thousands of clay tablets, preserving knowledge about laws, science, and daily life. In the Middle and Late Bronze Ages, the Babylonian and Assyrian kingdoms became powerful. King Hammurabi's rule was a high point, with great achievements in culture and learning. But Mesopotamia's power shifted over time as new groups like the Kassites and Hittites took over. The discovery of ironworking during this period introduced new weapons and tools, changing warfare and daily life. And one of the major players during this era was the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Under the leadership of Tiglath-Pileser III, who ruled from 745 to 727 BCE, the empire expanded quickly. Later kings like Sargon II, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal carried on this growth. These rulers weren't just warriors, they were also skilled administrators. For example, Ashurbanipal created one of the earliest known libraries in Nineveh. The Neo-Assyrian Empire became a superpower, controlling territories that included Babylonia, Syria, Israel, and parts of Egypt. But just as it reached its peak, it began to collapse. In 612 BCE, its central cities were attacked by a coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians, bringing the empire to an abrupt end. At the same time, other groups like the Neo-Hittite and Neo-Babylonian empires were gaining strength. One of the most famous Neo-Babylonian kings was Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled from 605 to 562 BCE. He's well known for destroying Jerusalem in 588 BCE and forcing its people into exile, a period called the Babylonian exile. Nebuchadnezzar also turned Babylon into a stunning city, with landmarks like the Ishtar Gate and the Great Ziggurat, often linked to the biblical Tower of Babel. However, Babylon's glory days didn't last. In 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered the city, ending its independence. This marked the start of a new era, called Classical Antiquity, lasting from 500 BCE to the 7th century. Mesopotamia became part of the vast Achaemenid Persian Empire. This period brought major cultural shifts, including the decline of cuneiform writing, which had been central to Mesopotamian culture for thousands of years. Later, Alexander the Great conquered the region in 331 BCE and hoped to rebuild Babylon, but his sudden death left his plans unfinished. Control passed to his general Seleucus I Nicator, who founded the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucids ruled until 63 BCE, when the Parthians took over, followed by the Sasanians in 224 CE. The Sasanian Empire valued Mesopotamian traditions and worked to preserve its cultural heritage. They kept libraries and honored the achievements of earlier civilizations. During the Parthian and Sasanian eras, Rome also got involved in the region, building infrastructure like roads and plumbing. However, their presence often brought conflict, as Roman emperors clashed with Parthian and Sasanian forces over control of the land. The ancient identity of Mesopotamia faced a major shift in the 7th century with the Muslim Arab conquest. This brought a new language, religion, and legal system, effectively ending Mesopotamia's ancient era. While some aspects of its culture survived, much of it was absorbed into the Islamic world. Today, the once great cities of Mesopotamia are reduced to ruins, but their influence still echoes through history. Mesopotamia's legacy is everywhere. The 60-second minute, the 60-minute hour, and the 360-degree circle all come from Sumerian innovations tied to their sacred number, 60. They developed advanced systems of irrigation, agriculture, writing, and mathematics, laying the groundwork for urban life and technological progress. Even their epic stories and religious ideas shaped later cultures, influencing texts like the Hebrew Bible and Western traditions. In the 19th century, archaeologists rediscovered Mesopotamia's forgotten past. They unearthed clay tablets with cuneiform writing, revealing records and stories that were far older than the Bible. This discovery changed how people understood history, showing that civilizations had risen and fallen long before biblical times.